Sophia Reynolds had spent most of her 24 years proving that appearances rarely told the truth. Living inside a cramped apartment on Chicago's South Side, she balanced multiple part-time jobs while caring for her father, whose worsening illness drained every dollar she earned. Sleep had become a luxury, hope an expensive habit. Yet she refused to surrender. People often judged her before she spoke. Her healthy, curvy figure attracted whispers, careless jokes, and assumptions that she was slow, clumsy, or incapable of hard work. She learned to smile through humiliation because survival mattered more than pride. A temporary housekeeping agency unexpectedly called with a last-minute assignment. One of their regular workers had failed to report, and the client demanded an immediate replacement. The address belonged to Blackthorn Mansion. Even in Chicago, the Blackthorn name carried its own gravity. The Blackthorn Mafia empire ruled from the shadows, expanding its influence through ruthless strategy rather than public spectacle. Politicians feared crossing them. Rival organizations disappeared without explanation, and law enforcement rarely found enough evidence to challenge them. At the center stood Alexander Blackthorn, 38 years old, known throughout the underworld as the Iron Wolf. Towering, broad-shouldered, and emotionally unreadable, he had built his empire through calculated intelligence and absolute control. Stories claimed he could end wars with a single phone call and silence betrayal with nothing more than a glance. Sophia knew none of that firsthand. She only knew the mansion waiting beyond its iron gates looked more like a royal palace than a private residence. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Priceless paintings decorated endless hallways, while armed security stood as naturally as statues. Every detail announced power. The senior household staff examined Sophia with barely disguised amusement. Several exchanged knowing smiles after noticing her figure. "So they sent her," one maid whispered. Another quietly laughed, certain the newcomer would not survive a single day inside Blackthorn Mansion. Sophia ignored every comment. Years of ridicule had taught her that silence often revealed more than arguments ever could. As she worked, her attention drifted beyond polished furniture and expensive decorations. She noticed security cameras pointing toward empty corridors instead of valuable entrances. A grandfather clock had been recently moved despite the dust pattern beneath it. One hallway contained fresh footprints leading toward a door every servant deliberately avoided. Everyone believed Sophia noticed nothing. In reality, she noticed everything. Hours later, she received instructions to dust Alexander Blackthorn's private study while he attended an important meeting elsewhere in the estate. The room felt strangely untouched, almost frozen in time. While cleaning the massive oak desk, she accidentally shifted a leather portfolio that had been tucked beneath several financial reports. Medical documents spilled onto the polished surface. Her eyes caught one sentence before she could look away. The confidential record suggested that Alexander Blackthorn had lost function on one side of his body following a secret neurological injury. Sophia froze, realizing she had just uncovered the one secret powerful enough to shake the Iron Wolf's entire empire. Sophia carefully returned the medical file to its exact position, forcing herself to breathe normally before leaving the study. She understood that knowledge could become a burden, especially inside a mansion built on power and secrecy. Whatever had happened to Alexander Blackthorn was clearly meant to remain hidden from everyone beyond a trusted circle. The following morning, an unexpected instruction altered her routine. Instead of assigning her ordinary housekeeping duties, the estate manager directed Sophia to assist with organizing schedules for several departments after a clerk unexpectedly fell ill. The task seemed harmless, but every page contained conflicting appointments, duplicate supply orders, and security requests that failed to match staff movements. Within an hour, Sophia quietly identified mistakes no one else had questioned. When the corrected schedule reached Alexander's office, he requested the records personally. From behind his massive desk, the Iron Wolf studied the papers before shifting his attention toward the young maid standing silently across the room. His expression betrayed nothing, but his mind measured details the way it always had. Most employees followed instructions without thinking. Sophia had recognized patterns. Rather than praising her, Alexander offered another assignment. He asked her to review household inventory logs that had frustrated experienced administrators for weeks. Once again, She noticed subtle inconsistencies. Luxury items listed as delivered had never reached storage. Maintenance reports described repairs that had never occurred. Tiny irregularities formed a much larger picture. Alexander said almost nothing, yet each successful observation confirmed what his veteran advisors had failed to recognize. Sophia Reynolds possessed an unusually disciplined mind hidden beneath an appearance everyone had dismissed. Outside the mansion, her life remained painfully ordinary. Every evening she traveled across Chicago to visit her father at the hospital, where machines work harder than medicine seemed able to. She never complained about exhaustion. Instead, she watched the city around her. She noticed anxious nurses pretending to smile, exhausted commuters avoiding eye contact, and wealthy businessmen walking past struggling families without slowing their pace. The world constantly revealed itself to anyone willing to pay attention. The greatest advantage rarely belonged to the strongest person in the room. It belonged to the one everyone ignored. Back inside Blackthorn Mansion, Alexander quietly instructed his senior staff to keep Sophia close whenever operational records required review. None of them understood why a temporary maid suddenly received responsibilities beyond her position, but none dared question the master's decisions. Late one evening, a confidential intelligence report arrived from Blackthorn surveillance teams stationed throughout the city. Alexander read every line without changing expression. A rival organization had discovered that the feared Iron Wolf was no longer physically invincible. Believing his hidden condition had weakened both the man and his empire, they had begun coordinating a direct assault against Blackthorn Mansion. For the first time in years, Alexander faced an enemy who believed he could no longer fight back, and the countdown to the attack had already begun. The intelligence report remained on Alexander Blackthorn's desk long after midnight, but his attention had shifted elsewhere. A rival attack was approaching. Yet another battle demanded equal urgency, the one his own body fought every day. Sophia could no longer ignore what she had discovered inside the confidential medical records. The neurological damage affecting one side of Alexander's body explained subtle details she had quietly observed. The slight hesitation before standing, the carefully controlled movements of his left arm, and the almost invisible adjustment he made while climbing stairs. None of the household staff noticed. They only saw the legend. Sophia saw the man struggling to protect it. She spent the next several days researching every spare moment she could find. Between shifts at the mansion and visits to her father, she borrowed anatomy books from a public library, watched licensed rehabilitation demonstrations available to the public, and spoke carefully with medical supply clerk about basic therapy equipment, without revealing who might use it. She never claimed to be a medical professional. Instead, she combined careful observation with practical knowledge gained, while helping care for her father through months of physical recovery. When an opportunity finally appeared, she approached Alexander with quiet confidence. Rather than offering sympathy, she proposed simple exercises designed to improve balance, coordination, and control movement. She explained each step honestly, making it clear that she was sharing practical techniques, not replacing professional medical care. Alexander accepted for one reason alone. She had never pitted him. Their sessions remained hidden within quiet corridors of Blackthorn Mansion before sunrise, when most employees were asleep. Sophia transformed ordinary spaces into discreet training routes using furniture, handrails, measured walking distances, and household objects that challenged coordination without attracting attention. Progress arrived slowly. Some mornings ended in visible frustration. Others produced small victories measured in steadier footsteps or stronger grip. Sophia celebrated none of them aloud. She understood that dignity mattered as much as recovery. Watching from a distance, Alexander recognized a quality he had rarely encountered. Courage was common among soldiers. Loyalty could be purchased. But genuine determination, offered without expectation of reward, was almost impossible to find. The world had laughed at Sophia because of the shape of her body. Alexander valued her because of the strength of her character and the precision of her mind. As days passed, his confidence gradually returned alongside subtle improvements in mobility. The exercises strengthened more than weakened muscles. They restored belief that his greatest limitation did not have to define his future. Yet secrets rarely stayed hidden inside Blackthorn Mansion. From an upper balcony, one of Alexander's most trusted lieutenants quietly watched another early morning training session. He observed Sophia directing movements with surprising confidence and noticed the unmistakable improvement in the boss's condition. His suspicion quickly hardened into ambition. If a temporary maid had become indispensable to the Iron Wolf, removing her could reshape the balance of power inside the Empire. And before sunrise the next day, he had already begun planning exactly how to do it. The morning after the hidden training session was discovered, Blackthorn Mansion felt unchanged to everyone except Sophia. She sensed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Security assignments changed without explanation. Even routine deliveries arrived at unusual hours. Someone was rearranging pieces on the board. The source of that change soon became clear. Victor Hale had served Alexander Blackthorn for years and enjoyed a reputation as the Empire's most dependable lieutenant. Calm under pressure and respected throughout the organization, he appeared to embody unwavering loyalty. Few questioned his judgment, and even fewer noticed how much authority had gradually accumulated in his hands while Alexander recovered in private. Sophia noticed, while updating household schedules, she found transport orders that conflicted with warehouse inventories. Security teams were redirected away from strategic entrances on nights when no official events were planned. Financial records showed payments routed through shell companies that had never appeared in previous reports. Individually, each inconsistency seemed insignificant. Together, they formed a deliberate pattern. Rather than accusing anyone, Sophia quietly began collecting facts. She copied dates into a small notebook, compared signatures across internal documents, and mapped recurring names that appeared in shipping manifests and expense reports. Outside the mansion, her search continued. During hospital visits, she arranged brief conversations with two former Blackthorn employees who had resigned under mysterious circumstances. Neither offered direct accusations, but both described Victor's growing influence during the previous year and hinted that questioning his decisions often ended careers without explanation. Sophia also began paying attention to Victor's movements across the city. Without placing herself in dangerous situations, she noticed recurring visits to businesses that had no visible connection to Blackthorn operations. Public corporate filings and financial records revealed several companies linked to the same legal representatives, creating a web of transactions that concealed substantial sums of money. Back at the mansion, she reviewed coded maintenance requests and supply logs. Their timing aligned almost perfectly with Victor's unexplained meetings, suggesting that ordinary paperwork had become a discrete communication system. Power rarely collapses because enemies break the front gate. More often, it erodes when trust is quietly replaced by ambition. Sophia organized every observation into a clear timeline. She still lacked absolute proof of treason, but the evidence pointed in only one direction. Someone inside Blackthorn Mansion was preparing for a future in which Alexander no longer ruled. Victor soon realized that routine records were being examined more carefully than before. He discreetly questioned supervisors, reviewed surveillance reports, and traced recent requests for archive files. Again and again, one name surfaced: Sophia Reynolds. The temporary maid everyone had dismissed had become the only person connecting the scattered pieces of his carefully hidden plan. Victor understood that if she reached Alexander with convincing evidence, years of manipulation would collapse overnight. He made a single quiet phone call, issued one unmistakable order, and by nightfall a contract had been placed on Sophia Reynolds before she ever realized she had become the target. Victor Hale's order remained invisible to the people inside Blackthorn Mansion, but Sophia instinctively became more cautious. She varied her routines, avoided predictable schedules, and remained alert without revealing her suspicions. Protecting herself mattered, yet protecting Alexander's greatest secret mattered even more. Before dawn each morning, the mansion awakened in silence. Those quiet hours belonged to Alexander and Sophia. Their training had evolved far beyond simple rehabilitation. Guided by techniques she had carefully studied and adapted from reputable rehabilitation methods, Sophia designed progressive exercises that emphasized balance, coordination, endurance, and controlled strength. She never rushed improvement, knowing that consistency achieved what force never could. Hidden corridors became walking courses marked by measured distances. The private gym transformed into a controlled training space where Alexander rebuilt confidence alongside physical ability. Every successful movement replaced frustration with discipline. Every setback became another lesson rather than another defeat. Sophia remained calm through each session. She corrected posture, adjusted equipment, recorded progress, and encouraged patience without treating Alexander as fragile. She respected the man beneath the legend, and that respect slowly erased the invisible wall he had built around himself. Weeks passed. The difference became impossible for Alexander to ignore. His stride grew steadier. His reactions sharpened. Tasks that once required visible concentration gradually became instinctive again. Even trusted advisors noticed renewed energy without understanding its source. Alexander had spent years relying on fear to command loyalty. Sophia earned his trust without asking for it. For the first time in a very long while, he invited someone outside his inner circle to offer opinions beyond household matters. She questioned inefficient routines, identified overlooked security concerns, and proposed practical solutions that consistently proved effective. Her judgment became as valuable as her discretion. Outside the estate, Sophia quietly obtained specialized exercise bands, adaptive therapy tools, and compact rehabilitation equipment through legitimate medical suppliers, ensuring every purchase appeared ordinary. She also noticed unfamiliar vehicles lingering near roads leading toward the mansion. Rather than confronting anyone, she subtly adjusted delivery schedules and training locations, preventing curious observers from discovering Alexander's gradual recovery. People had spent years measuring Sophia by her appearance. They never imagined the strongest force in the mansion would be the woman everyone underestimated. As Alexander regained strength, he understood an uncomfortable truth. His recovery had not been built by wealth, influence, or intimidation. It had been built by one determined woman who refused to let another human being surrender to limitation. Meanwhile, Sophia continued examining the scattered clues surrounding Victor Hale's suspicious activities. Public business filings, transportation records, and seemingly unrelated financial transactions slowly connected into a single network. One final document completed the pattern. A coded payment route linked Victor's hidden accounts to an organization controlled by the Romano family, one of Blackthorn's oldest and most dangerous rivals. The betrayal was no longer suspicion. Victor Hale had been secretly working with the enemy, and Sophia now possessed the first evidence capable of bringing his entire conspiracy into the light. The evidence linking Victor Hale to the Romano family reached Alexander Blackthorn through Sophia before dawn. He studied every document without interruption, comparing dates, financial transfers, and operational reports. By the time he finished, the pattern was unmistakable. The conspiracy had been growing quietly for months, and exposing it meant the enemy would likely move sooner than planned. They did. Within hours, coordinated attacks struck several Blackthorn businesses and safe houses across Chicago. Communication lines flooded with reports of sabotage, stolen shipments, and carefully timed diversions designed to stretch the organization's resources in every direction at once. The assault was disciplined. It was also predictable. Sophia noticed that every strike targeted locations with symbolic value rather than the empire's strongest logistical centers. The attackers wanted panic as much as territory. She laid a city map across a conference table and marked each incident. As the pattern emerged, she identified the districts most likely to become the next targets. Alexander listened without interruption. Rather than reacting emotionally, he reorganized trusted teams around Sophia's analysis. Loyal captains received new assignments, vulnerable operations were quietly evacuated, and security was reinforced at locations the enemy believed were lightly defended. The Romano family walked into preparations they never expected. Across the city, warehouses became strategic checkpoints instead of easy prizes. Financial records and sensitive documents were relocated before raiding crews arrived. High-rise offices that appeared occupied had already been cleared, while experienced security personnel waited at alternative locations chosen through careful planning rather than habit. The battle became one of intelligence instead of brute force. Sophia remained inside the command center, comparing incoming reports, identifying inconsistencies, and helping redirect resources as new information arrived. She never issued orders beyond her authority, but her observations consistently helped Alexander make faster, better-informed decisions. By nightfall, the coordinated offensive had lost its momentum. Several attacks failed completely. Others achieved little beyond exposing the rival families' methods. Even longtime Blackthorn commanders quietly admitted that someone had anticipated the enemy's strategy with remarkable precision. The world had judged Sophia by the shape of her body. In the moment that mattered most, it was the strength of her judgment that protected an empire. As calm gradually returned, Alexander understood that survival had depended on more than loyal soldiers or hidden resources. Victory had come because someone everyone underestimated had seen connections others ignored. Yet one danger remained unresolved. Victor Hale had disappeared before the attacks began. Late that evening, a trusted scout delivered urgent news. Victor had broken from the Romano command structure and was traveling back toward Blackthorn Mansion with a small, heavily armed group. His objective was no longer the Empire itself. His objective was Sophia Reynolds. After everything she had uncovered, Victor no longer cared about reclaiming power. He wanted revenge, and he intended to settle it inside the mansion where her journey had first begun. Victor Hale arrived at Blackthorn Mansion, believing fear would succeed where deception had failed. Instead, he found every entrance secured by loyal personnel who had already received evidence of the betrayal. The financial records, coded communications, and operational timeline Sophia had assembled left little room for denial. One by one, Victor's remaining supporters abandoned him rather than defend a collapsing conspiracy. The threat inside the mansion ended as quickly as it had surfaced. For Alexander Blackthorn, the confrontation marked more than the removal of a traitor. It exposed weaknesses in the Empire's internal systems that had gone unnoticed for years. Trust would no longer be based solely on reputation or years of service. Every department would now be measured by accountability, transparency, and verified results. Sophia helped organize the transition. Drawing on the careful methods that had uncovered Victor's scheme, she redesigned reporting procedures, simplified communication between trusted teams, and established routine reviews that made hidden manipulation far more difficult. The mansion gradually became more efficient, not because authority increased, but because information flowed more clearly. Alexander watched each improvement with growing respect. He had once believed strength meant carrying every burden alone. Sophia challenged that belief without ever trying to replace him. She offered perspective when emotions threatened judgment, noticed patterns others overlooked, and reminded him that the strongest leaders accepted help from people who earned their confidence. That lesson reshaped the Empire. Outside the mansion, Blackthorn businesses reopened under tighter oversight and stronger security. Warehouses resumed operations, legitimate investments expanded, and community-facing companies quietly increased charitable support throughout neighborhoods affected by the recent violence. Public attention slowly shifted from rumors of chaos to stories of resilience and stability. Sophia remained far from the spotlight. She preferred working behind the scenes, reviewing logistics, coordinating trusted managers, and solving practical problems before they became public crises. Employees who had once dismissed her now sought her advice, recognizing that calm judgment often achieved what intimidation never could. People had laughed because they mistook kindness for weakness and appearance for ability. In the end, the Empire endured because one underestimated woman refused to let either define her. Alexander no longer viewed Sophia as a temporary employee or even as an advisor. She had become the person whose honesty he trusted most, the steady presence who strengthened both his decisions and his resolve. Together, they guided Blackthorn through its most uncertain chapter, proving that loyalty built on respect could outlast loyalty built on fear. Weeks later, while reviewing archive files recovered from Victor's private office, Sophia discovered a sealed envelope hidden inside the false bottom of an old ledger. Its contents were brief but unmistakable. The document referenced a confidential alliance with an unidentified figure known only as the heir, claiming that one surviving rival had deliberately remained in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to challenge the Blackthorn Empire. Sophia slowly closed the file, realizing Victor had never been the final enemy. The discovery of the file marked the heir confirmed Sophia's instincts. Victor Hale had never intended to stand alone. Before his network completely collapsed, He had arranged one final contingency, leaving a handful of loyal operatives prepared to erase evidence, disrupt Blackthorn operations, and disappear before investigators could identify them. Sophia refused to let that happen. Rather than responding with haste, she reconstructed Victor's remaining communication network from the documents recovered in his office, comparing timestamps, delivery routes, financial records, and encrypted notes. She predicted where his last allies would attempt to regroup. Alexander proved a carefully coordinated operation. Trusted Blackthorn teams quietly secured key locations while avoiding unnecessary violence. Safe houses were searched, financial accounts frozen, and hidden storage sites recovered before Victor's remaining supporters could reorganize. One by one, the final pieces of his conspiracy disappeared. By sunrise, the organization that had nearly fractured the Blackthorn Empire no longer possessed the resources to threaten it. Alexander recognized that the victory belonged to more than superior manpower. It belonged to careful observation, disciplined thinking, and the courage to question what everyone else accepted without hesitation. The Empire entered a new chapter. Businesses resumed normal operations. Legitimate investments expanded across the city, and neighborhoods affected by the conflict gradually returned to stability. News outlets reported on the sudden collapse of several organized criminal networks, without fully understanding the internal betrayal that caused it. Public attention focused on renewed economic activity and the surprising calm that followed weeks of uncertainty. Inside Blackthorn Mansion, change became permanent. Departments operated with stronger oversight. Decisions relied on verified information rather than assumptions, and loyalty was measured by integrity instead of appearances. Employees who had once dismissed Sophia because of her healthy, curvy figure now understood how profoundly they had misjudged her. The greatest mistake people made was believing strength could be measured by appearance. Real strength revealed itself through character, wisdom, and the willingness to stand firm when everyone else looked away. Alexander never forgot who had stood beside him when his body weakened and his empire stood on the edge of collapse. Sophia Reynolds had arrived as a temporary maid carrying quiet determination and invisible burdens. She became the trusted strategist whose insight restored confidence, exposed betrayal, protected the people around her, and helped reshape the future of Blackthorn. Yet peace rarely lasted forever. Several days later, while reviewing materials recovered from one of Victor's abandoned properties, Sophia discovered a hidden compartment inside an old steel document case. Within it rested a sealed file bearing the Blackthorn crest. Inside was a faded family record, a recent photograph, and a handwritten note claiming that another blood relative connected to the Blackthorn legacy had survived in complete secrecy for years. Sophia looked toward Alexander, realizing their greatest challenge might not come from an enemy outside the Empire, but from a forgotten member of the family whose return could change everything.